My name is Jeremy Lasky. I'm a co-founder of Perception. I was always into drawing and art. My dad was an art teacher at high school for 40 years. My mom was an interior designer, so I grew up in a very creative house, and all I did was draw as a kid. I loved comic books, so I kind of grew up thinking I would be an architect. Because I wanted to be an architect, I applied to a lot of colleges that had great architecture programs, which led me to going to Carnegie Mellon. And Carnegie Mellon was a top architecture school, and that was initially why I went there. That was a 5-year program, and after the first year I realized it really wasn't for me. And in fact, I was much more suited to be a graphic designer. I did a lot of designing in high school. I designed a school magazine. I did a lot of flyers and posters and things like that. So I really should have gone that path to begin with, but I figured it out once I got to college. So I transferred into graphic design after a year in architecture, so I was able to still get a minor in architecture, and it really laid a great foundation for my design education. And then I spent the next 3 years finishing up the graphic design program at Carnegie Mellon. I also minored in business because somewhere deep in the back of my mind I always wanted to start my own company, so I thought at the time that it would be good to get some of that foundational education in business as well. First job growing up was working at a Mac computer store in New York City called Mac Emporium, which was a very unique place. It was the only store devoted exclusively to Macintosh software and peripherals. They actually didn't sell Macintosh computers. They weren't allowed. You could only buy those from Apple back in the late 80s, early 90s. But this store specialized in everything for the Mac. So I was a 14-year-old kid working there, selling software, demoing software, and that's where I got to learn a lot of the old design programs like PageMaker, Quark Express, Super Paint, some pretty old applications. And then over the years, they gradually started getting the Adobe products, and I got to learn those as well. So this is a good story. Coming out of college, it was the summer of '95, and I had a very traditional portfolio. Carnegie Mellon's design program at the time was very traditional. It was all logos and posters and basically print design. So everything that I graduated with was in a book, was a physical book, and I actually made a box to showcase my work. It was a giant cardboard box. And the protocol for young designers looking for a job was you'd go around from design studio to design studio with your portfolio, you drop it off and leave, and then you would hope that once they got around to reviewing that day's drop-offs, there was enough interest to bring you in for an interview if there was even any potential job opportunities at that studio. I had a dream list of design firms that I looked up to and greatly admired in college, and right at the top of that list was a company called RGA, R. Greenberg Associates. And the way I discovered R. Greenberg Associates was in my senior year in college. I had a professor who really got me excited about film titles, and I never really considered film titles as a unique art form, but he showed me the fantastic work of Saul Bass, showed me a reel he had of all the James Bond titles, To Kill a Mockingbird, and he had a reel from this company in New York called R. Greenberg Associates, and right at the top of that reel was the Superman titles from 1978 and hundreds of films throughout the 80s that they had done titles for. So there was something that really went off in my brain about the idea of combining film with graphic design, and film titles really were the perfect blend of that. There was only one company in New York doing that work at the time, and that was RGA. I had also contacted Saul Bass, who was still alive at the time. I got a great letter back from him, a very kind rejection letter. So cutting back to graduating and going around New York, I kept RGA at the top of my list, and I thought to myself that I'm going to try a few of these other design studios first and see how I do and what the response is, because I was a little nervous about going right to the top and getting rejected. So I really wanted to work up my courage and confidence to getting there. So after getting nowhere with these other studios, I ultimately got to a place in my head where I just figured, what the hell, I'll give it a try. And one day I walked into the lobby of RGA, and it was a huge courtyard. There's a classic old building on 39th Street. You have to be buzzed in from the street. There's a front gate. It's very out of the ordinary for New York, but RGA was a pretty special place. And they brought me into the lobby. The receptionist basically asked me, did they call you to bring in your book? Is that why you're here? And I really didn't understand what she was talking about, so I just went with it and I said, yeah, they called me, here it is. And what had happened was RGA's creative directors had just put an ad in the Sunday New York Times 2 days prior, because again, in 1995, that's where people looked for jobs, was in the newspaper, and the Sunday Help Wanted paper was a phone book. There was no Monster.com or Hot Jobs or anything like that. So apparently they got thousands and thousands of resumes from this posting, and they were narrowing it down to just a few selections and asking those people to bring in their portfolios. So I sort of leapfrogged that pile of resumes and got right to the front of the line, unbeknownst to me at the time. And they saw my book and they invited me in for an interview in the days that followed. A week later they hired me, and I spent the next 5.5 years of my life at RGA. There was a great collaboration we had with Al Pacino on his Richard III film, which was I was pretty starstruck with that, because meeting Al Pacino and having him come, to RGA and critique our designs in person was very, very memorable. But the one project that really stands out to me was an AICP title sequence I did in 1999. It was shortly before I ended up leaving RGA, and the reason was because I kind of had full autonomy on it, and I was able to design it, animate, build it, and really just own that project for the month or 6 weeks that it took. And I worked day and night on that thing, and it was shown at a pretty prestigious event, AICP, at the Museum of Modern Art, which is a huge event of all ad agency producers and creatives that come and are there for this gala to watch the award winners of that night. And the introductory sequence that kind of kicks the whole thing off was what I had designed, and then I had to design categories for each of the awards. So it was an amazing feeling of pride, and it got such a great response afterwards, and I have a great memory of that. He was working at RGA already when I got there. And I remember that when we first met, I think I was being given a tour of RGA, and we immediately hated each other. It was just an instant disliking. I think I shook his hand, and he tried to break my hand when I shook it. But he had a funny sense of humor and an attitude, which I kind of like, because I have a similar edge being from Brooklyn. So over the years, we did get to collaborate on a lot of projects, and initially it was always very frustrating, because he'd always kind of have this attitude with me, like, what do you want? Get out of here, this isn't your domain, you go in the other room, this is my world. I think over time we broke through those boundaries, and we worked really well together and kind of got a really good creative chemistry. And we did get to collaborate on a lot of things over the years. As RGA was gradually building up this interactive division, our world of digital was shrinking at RGA, and we pretty much saw the writing on the wall that it was a matter of time before RGA was going to go completely interactive, completely digital. And they made that official announcement in late '99, and basically told the entire team that was left doing the commercial work and the film work that you had 3 months to either find a job or interview for a position here in another capacity in this newly formed interactive division. So I took the exit door. I left. It was sort of one of those moments that was scary, but when you look back on those things, you realize it was the best thing that ever happened to you, because I could have easily stayed at RGA and been pretty happy. It was a great, amazing place, and very prestigious to be able to work there. But I could also see 20 years of my life going by in a blink, and then always wondering in the back of my head, I wish I tried my own thing. I never really tried it. I never took the leap. So this is kind of a chance that I saw as the opportunity to take that risk, to take that chance, and I certainly was young enough to take it on. So I took that as a calling to do my own thing. What happened right after RGA though is I did get recruited by a headhunter to be a creative director at a startup digital company here in New York called Gotham. And cutting back to the year 2000, most of you guys remember that that was a pretty exciting time where startups are popping up left and right, and stock options were being offered as compensation, and I got kind of pulled into that briefly, and I took on, I took this role on at Gotham. It was pretty short-lived. The company folded up in the tidal wave of dot-com implosions in 2001. And the whole time I was there, I really felt like it was very temporary. And I had already been in contact with Danny, who was still at RGA, equally bored with the web work that he was doing there. We both longed for the days of doing commercials and broadcast work and film work. And technology was really accelerating to the point where we could actually do our own thing with a couple of Macs and some great software, and we could create a small company and start doing the commercial work, the television work, the broadcast work of the past, and we can do it on our own. Fondest memory of Perception was the first show of Iron Man 2, and as a team we went to the movie theaters. It was a 9 a.m. show, Friday, I believe May 2010, and we got to see all of our hard work on the big screen, and it was very emotional. The first act of the film, I think every scene had some graphic or design that Perception had done, so it was unbelievable. It really was a moment I'll never forget. My favorite project of Perception would have to be Iron Man 2. And the reason was it was such a game changer for the company. It was a dream come true for us in that Marvel was a client and a brand that we, Danny and myself, had both been eagerly wanting to work with since the day we incorporated. It was a company and a brand that we would have died to work for. And getting the opportunity to work on something as epic and monumental as Iron Man 2 was almost hard to believe. And then the fact that we did so much in the film, it wasn't just one small piece, but it actually was 100 shots plus, and we were one of the vendors, you know, the many vendors in the film. We had some of the most shots of any vendor. So changed our lives, opened up a world of opportunity for us in technology, as you guys have heard from our previous episodes. So that was definitely a favorite project. Secret of my success is hard work, being hungry, staying hungry, never giving up, getting up a lot earlier than everybody else, just working non-stop, and just having a never-ending passion and drive to succeed. You know, for me, I have a blueprint in my life that failure is not an option. You know, if you have enough will, you could find an answer to any problem. It comes down to being resourceful. It comes down to what you want to focus on. If you focus on negative things, it's going to make negative things happen. If you focus on positive things generally happen. So the harder you work, the more likely you are to succeed. The dream project yet to be fulfilled is to fully design the user experience of an automobile. We have gotten very close to that. We've done some amazing work with Ford and Mercedes and Chrysler. But to actually take a user experience from start to finish all the way to the final production vehicle is definitely still a dream project of ours. My best advice for anyone starting their own business is have a plan, make yourself unique, make sure that you have a specialty and an expertise that no one else has. You know, a business is really nothing more than innovation and marketing. So you have to do both in equal measures. You have to be innovative and you have to know how to tell the world about what you're doing. If you can consistently add more value than your competition, you're going to do well. One of the best pieces of advice I ever got was from Bob Greenberg, who told me to be fearless. And I always remember that in some of the scariest and most uncomfortable moments that any business owner is sure to face, is to just stay fearless, keep moving forward, conquer your fears, and you'll make it through. A great piece of advice I got from a design professor in college was something that I always think about too, is don't try to be different, try to be good. Good is different enough. In other words, a lot of designers just try to do something different for different sake, but in fact, they're not doing anything that's special. It's just the latest filter, the latest plugin, the latest fad or trend, but there's no substance to it. So for me, as a designer coming into my own career, I always took that with me, and I wanted to make sure that everything that I designed and everything that I conceptualized was good. If it was different, that's great, it's a bonus, but I wanted to make sure that first it was a good idea. What advice would I give a young designer right out of school? Be open-minded, be very hungry, be willing to try new things, be willing to work very, very hard. When you come out with your portfolio, you want to showcase your best and only your best work. Remember that you can show 9 amazing pieces in your portfolio, but if you show 1 mediocre piece, it's going to bring the rest of the 9 pieces down. So I would always recommend that you show less, that's good, than trying to jam in more, and that always brings down and it waters down the rest of the portfolio. My biggest pet peeves are people that don't follow through on great ideas. Everybody has great ideas, but what separates the people who are successful are the ones that can follow through on those ideas and bring them to fruition. You're always going to be measured by your actions, not your words. So you can have a great idea, but it's what you do with it that counts. One of my other pet peeves is lateness. I like when people are on time because it respects the other people at the meeting in the room. When everybody's consistently waiting for one person, then it's definitely a pet peeve of mine. I also don't have a lot of patience for laziness. I love to see a similar hunger, passion, and drive in my team and my colleagues that I have in myself, and I'm definitely, I think, a little bit out of the ordinary in that regard, but I'm always looking for like-minded folks who have a similar energy and drive and can keep up with me. Out of all the tech work we've done in the last couple of years, one of the standouts for me is the flight simulator operating system we did for a Canadian aerospace company called CAE. That was truly bringing a cinematic experience to a real-world piece of software. And every time we show that piece, we always get an amazing response. It really is something that feels otherworldly. My favorite Marvel film is probably the first Iron Man, because that's the film that really kicked off the entire Marvel Cinematic Universe, and I think that they set the bar with that movie, and that's where Robert Downey Jr. really became Tony Stark. They're the same person, and it just it set the whole ball in motion for Marvel. So I think that film truly stands out amongst all the others, even though every other Marvel film is great as well. The ideal client for Perception is any client that has an opportunity where we can get involved on the ground level and really shape the destiny of a project. We love nothing more than to sink our teeth into a multi-phase, long-term relationship where we can really influence the final outcome of the product. We love a client with a great sense of urgency that needs things to happen very quickly, quick turnaround. That comes from our background in the broadcast and the film world, where we're used to having to get things on air in a matter of days. When a large corporate entity moves really, really slowly, it's definitely not ideal for us. We like to move very quickly, and we're very nimble in that regard. We're not a one-off project shop. We really like a long-term relationship where we can create a collaborative union where we develop our own communication with the client. And instead of 2 teams of us and them, it really becomes one collaborative unit.